You may be a high schooler, but it's time to act like a business veteran providing advice to a judge who is probably going to be older than you. No pressure. I'll teach you how to pretend so well that you actually become qualified at pretending. If only I could get over my imposter syndrome like that. DECA's other corporate baddie, Gloria, is here with a guide to roleplays. Presentation edition. A competition to who can BS business advice the best. Roleplays are a type of DECA event where you play a role. Holy crap. You are usually asked to present an organized plan or give advice on a business topic. Except you just thought of the proposal like 5 minutes ago. So not exactly the most accurate representation of the real business world, or so I hope. The role depends on the competition prompt you receive, which of course differs, and the prompt also depends on which event. We will discuss the exam in another video, but remember that roleplays aren't just roleplaying. False advertising at its finest. No matter what you've heard, DECA roleplays are not the antithesis to written events. Both require similar presentation skills, speaking clearly, being structured with your points, and actually having reasonable ideas. While roleplays feature significantly more thinking on the fly, enough practice will make the unexpected a whole lot more expected. DECA roleplay prompts come in the same format despite differences in events, which is a vaguely common DECA W. Let's take a look at one from Marketing Communication Series, or MCS. The top of a roleplay sheet will list 2 to 3 main things, most of which are traits that you don't really need to know, but knowledge is power, or so my teachers try to convince me. Pause if you'd like to read what they are. But wait! The third section is like the only part that is actually important in the header. That's the instructional area. DECA actually does tell you what overall topic your roleplay will fall into. Right, so this is the middle of the roleplay sandwich. Yum. First are the participant instructions, which provide competition and other logistical details, and by the end of the video, you already know what's in this section, so don't waste any time reading it when you compete. Then there are the 21st century skills. DECA wants you to display these skills in your roleplay. Shout for joy, because they don't change from roleplay to roleplay. You should also know these pretty well by the time you compete. Note how these skills are pretty general. Usually you don't consciously think, how can we be creative, or how can we show critical thinking while you prepare? These are qualities that you should naturally incorporate into your presentation. There's also some points on the judge rubric for overall impressions. This is the professionalism that DECA emphasizes so strongly. Anything and everything from how you dress to how you enunciate will be evaluated. Finally, performance indicators. Out of the middle section, the performance indicators are the most important things that you need to read and consciously address. I mean it. Do not ignore these. These are a set of bullets that your DECA event expects you to show or explain in your roleplay. And yes, you will be graded on these. The quantity of these PIs will differ between events, and they are generally thematically connected by whatever instructional area the roleplay covers. In summary, PIs, and to a lesser extent 21st century skills, are the main criteria by which you are graded. Here's the namesake of the event. As important as PIs are, you also gotta do what they say in the context of your event's prompt. If your PI says, explain the nature of email marketing tactics, you better explain those email marketing tactics in the context of the problem you are solving. Let's dissect the prompt itself. Once again, we face categories within categories. First, there's a short little summary at the top, which contains the roles that you, your partner if applicable, and the judge are playing. In this case, you roleplay as a marketing communications manager, while the judge is the director of marketing. Tip: tailor your communication to the role. You aren't always a consultant or an employee of the judge, so adapt as necessary. Then there's the organization you are working for / helping with. In this case, it's Pet Lab, an online retailer and diagnostic lab for pet owners. Then there's what the prompt is asking you to present to the judge. In this case, it's how to best inform past customers of new services. Now take all these parts together and embody it. You are Jane, or John Smith, the marketing communications manager from Pet Lab. You work a 9-to-5 job where you have constant back-to-back meetings where you tell your team how dog water the current branding is. That part was a joke. Well, kinda. Well, in summary, you need to embrace the role that you're playing, as this is part of the 21st century skills. Second, there's the context of the organization or initiative you are aiding with. And then there's what the prompt is asking in the third section with some more detail. Finally, there are the logistical and other fun instructions about your presentation. And after you finish your prep time, you will enter the competition room, greet the judge, sit down, and present your ideas. Then your judges will ask 2 required questions after your presentation that are presented ahead of time. And if they really care about it, they might ask more. So you already know everything that's in this 4th paragraph. Don't bother reading it. Remember, prompts will depend on your event and career cluster, so a finance roleplay will cover different topics and potential problems than a marketing roleplay. Each event gives a period from anywhere from 10 to 30 minutes to prepare your plan. You receive the prompt and blank pieces of paper to write down your ideas. When you receive a roleplay, highlight the following pieces of information. Structuring your presentation in a short period of time can be tough. You must combine ideas or solutions with explanations of business concepts. The easier strategy is to just list out every PI and relate it to the prompt, while the more difficult option is to focus more on a solution to the prompt and then weave in PIs along the way. Now, if all this flies over your head, at least burn this advice into your brain. Whatever you end up talking about should at least address both the context of the prompt and the corresponding PIs. Sprinkle in a bit of 21st century skills and you'll be well on your way. Questions that judges ask at the end may cause you to sweat, but remember the DECA golden rule. Pretend you know what you're talking about. Of course, the questions are usually related to the PI, so an answer shouldn't be too far in the back of your head. Take as little time as possible to put together a thoughtful response, but don't take so little time you start spitting words too. It's okay to ask for some time to think, and in my opinion, it's better to take a few seconds longer to say something meaningful rather than quickly make up something meaningless. Like an array of numerous ice cream flavors, there are plenty of different types of roleplay events for you refined folk. Recall that roleplay events have 2 main components: the exam, which is taken before ICDC, and the roleplay, which occurs at the conference in front of a judge. Unlike written events, which have enough exceptions to make anyone who is unwell enough to scroll through the entire deca.org/compete section, me, even more unwell, roleplay events have less. God, I missed being able to talk in generalities. The spirit of the roleplay is generally similar enough between events, but the topics and allocated time vary slightly. You can divide up roleplay events into 3, or I guess 4 categories. Well, personal financial literacy, or PFL, is a bit of an oddball, but I'll allow roleplays, one exception, free of charge. Principles of business administration, or to save myself some sanity, principles are a set of individual roleplay events covering core business topics for first-year DECA members. Core business topics? One might even call them principles. There are 5 principal events, 1 per career cluster. You receive 10 minutes to prepare and 10 minutes to present, which includes the time for the 2 questions at the end. Principal events have a 3-letter acronym that starts with P and then 2 other letters. As an aside, while principles are limited to first-year members, you don't have to do one if you're new. However, they're a great way to ease yourself into the whole DECA shenanigery, especially since the roleplays are shorter with fewer and more general performance indicators. Usually there's around 4. Similarly, your exam will be similarly. Your exam will be a little less specialized. That is to say, even if you're competing in principles of entrepreneurship, your exam will not contain more entrepreneurship-related questions than the other 4 events. In fact, the PIs and tested materials are limited to the business core, which is the center of the career cluster wheel that literally no one looks at except for me. So, in the end, the goal of principle is to learn the principles of business administration. Holy crap, that's why it's called that! We step up a bit to team decision-making events, which end with TDM. There are 8 TDM events, and here's your chance to work with someone else for your roleplay. All TDMs require 2 competitors. You present together, but take your exam separately. Since working with someone on a spontaneous presentation is much more difficult, you are supposed to receive 30 minutes of prep time. You present for 15 minutes, including the time for questions. But you will have almost double the quantity of PIs that principal events have, between 6 or 8. Unlike principals, team decision-making events get way more in depth in their career cluster. For example, Marketing Management Team Decision Making, or MTDM, is almost always about marketing instead of, general business administration. Still, you may run into some oddball instructional areas that don't seem to quite relate to the center of your career cluster, so the more you know, the better. Being polished with your presentation is important for any DECA event, but particularly with TDMs. From the get-go, choose your partner carefully. Make sure both of you are invested and willing to put in the work. Before SCDC, practice preparing and presenting together with the allotted time limits so you can learn what it looks like when your partner is ready to stop talking or is desperately floundering and needs your help. TDMs are one of the harder role-playing events, but they can be super fun and fulfilling. Is it obvious that I did a TDM? Individual series events are like the older siblings of the principals events. Both are individual events and provide 10 minutes to prep and 10 minutes to present, plus questions, and there are approximately the same quantity of PIs between the two events. However, individual series events are the most specialized out of all roleplay events. They can niche down on a specific aspect of a career cluster, which means more specific PIs that you are less likely to answer with something you finagle together. It's not impossible to make stuff up, but it's less likely. There are 14 individual series events. As for acronyms, you may be able to hear the sound of my acronym happy heart breaking, but there is no rule that organizes the event acronyms besides the whole using the first letter of each word. This is so tragic. For my friends who enjoy something niche or don't want to work with someone else, individual series are for you. We've been semi-minimal on exceptions, but personal financial literacy, PFL, is just a bit of an oddball. I've seen it listed under the finance career cluster, but it is also technically its own cluster, which means it is the only event with this light green color. It has its own PIs, its own exams. What a special guy. You can think of PFL as the individual series event to end all individual series events. That is quite literally the only event of its kind. Can't get more niche than that. It has the same prep present time allocation of 10-10. Your PIs will be focused on being literate with finances, spending, earning income, investment, managing credit. So maybe this is the boss that all of r/Wall Street bets ought to face. Anyways, this guy's all alone in the corner. Perhaps you'd like to join him? Let's go into some overall roleplay tips, and I will begin with the general stuff that anyone can tell you, but I'm going to tell you it again because it is important. First, practice. Practice, 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 and do more practice. Sit down to practice roleplays with your allocated prep/presentation time, which will be 10-10 or 30-15, to simulate the experience of outlining ideas on paper and giving a presentation. You can also practice presenting to someone with more experience with DECA because they will give you good advice or tips or tell you if you suck. Or if you don't have anyone to judge you, record your presentation and evaluate your vocal presentation along with the gestures. Remember, always address the PIs in some fashion. If you're taking the strategy of organizing your presentation around the PIs, the DECA acronym will help you address them. Of course, familiar yourself with defining and explaining the most common PIs in your event. The more roleplays you do, the more you'll get a handle on what PIs tend to show up. Also, don't say things that you're not willing for the judge to question you later on about. This will prevent you from getting jump scared when you offhandedly mention something and then they ask you about it. Judges at ICDC tend to lack significant business knowledge, so practice explaining in a way that even a layperson can understand. I use the word goofy not because they are silly and funky ideas, but because I've seen many different forms of advice that are kind of odd in comparison to the other stuff. So this may or may not be my response to that advice. Business cards and other gimmicks. My response, use them thoughtfully. Some people will advise you to rip up a piece of scratch paper to give your judge a business card at the end of your questioning period. That is, your presentation. This may be fitting if you're role-playing as an external consultant, but less so if you work under or above the judge's role. So my solution to the whole business card shenaniganery is end your speaking portion with a way to follow up. For example, I'll talk to the finance department and we can schedule a meeting to discuss their input on this idea. Or something like, I'll email you with these business notes as soon as we can after this. Just end with something suitably businessy that indicates a future interaction. It's a lot more representative of a normal roleplay anyways. For visuals, they're a great way to help you stand out, but don't use them for the sake of having them. Make sure they actually add to your presentation. Don't waste your time just drawing pretty pictures when you should really be thinking about actual ideas. Common visuals I used back in my heyday were Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the 4 P's of marketing, and a SWOT chart. However, these are really basic, so go above and beyond. Please be better than me. You could try to prepare like these ahead of time with common PIs, just knowing what you're going to draw for any situation, but remember to customize your visuals to any situation. Here's an actually good piece of advice for explaining your plan. You gotta explain why your plan is using your idea and not another one. Weighing the pros and cons of your ideas can show that you are actually aware of the strengths and weaknesses in your plan. Just don't mention too many weaknesses or your plan starts looking really bad. For example, we will be using digital marketing instead of print marketing because our target market is younger and therefore they are more likely to be on social media. Finally, for applications, explain PIs in the context of your prompt. Like, that's just a reminder I had to say again. That's important, but you can also go above and beyond with applications to existing businesses or similar industries. If a PI talks about tech and finance, you could talk about using AI in the financial sector today. Anyways, using these goofy things, with heavy quotes on goofy, should not come at the expense of your actual roleplay. Remember, the order of things you ought to focus on are addressing the rubric and speaking well, then incorporating other elements that will help you stand out. Look, you may feel unqualified, but now you're one step closer to qualification. The more practice, the more you'll start feeling better about your skills. So go forth, dear role player. Become the business person you were always meant to be. From R&D DECA's corporate Baddie, this is Gloria. Again, there's also the context of the organization or initiative you are It's going too fast. No, should we redo this section?
Let me see. Let's see if we can actually.
I'm going to drink some water. My throat's drying up a bit. I'm going to fill another 3 bottles of water after this.